Well, hi everybody. My name is Steve Brading, and Simon has asked if I would speak to you for 5 minutes about giving. So I want to speak from one verse in Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 9, and it says this: "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine." Now, the word first fruits reminds me of when we first got married. There was our first meal together. There was our first Sunday together. There was our first house together. There was our first wage together. And we decided together that from our wage that we would tithe our very first wage packet. We were both convinced of the rightness of tithing. Some people say, oh, well, that's just Old Testament law. But actually, Abraham tithed in Genesis 14 to Melchizedek, which was way before the law, and that was under a covenant clearly of grace. And so we saw that tithing for us was just a baseline, and from there we would then give to other things over and above as God directed us. And we've done that for the last 41 years. And our testimony has been that God has caused our barns to be filled and our vats to overflow with wine in a way which we could never ever have expected or planned. Let me give you just one example. After we got married, we looked to buy our first house, and the amount that we could afford was £20,000. Shows that it was a long time ago. And we'd seen a flat in Horham. We were living at the time in Heathfield, and we were looking to buy a flat in Horham for £19,500. We were very excited about this flat. It was a 2-bedroom flat, and we spoke to the mortgage people, and they said, yes, we'll give to you a mortgage, but we need to do an inspection. Well, they came round and inspected the property, sent the surveyors round. They said, actually, we won't give you a mortgage for this. It's only worth £17,000. Well, we felt rather dejected and bewildered by this. And the next day I was walking down the road, rather perplexed, wondering what it all meant. And a man called out to me from a house and said, please would I give him a hand to lift this heavy box from his front door to the back of this lorry? So I said, yes, of course I will. So we picked up this box. He could have been a burglar for all I know. And I chatted with him and said, what are you doing? Where are you off to? And so he said, well, actually, he said, we're moving to Canada. But he said, I've really struggled to sell the house. I've been unable to sell it and don't know what to do. So I said, oh, I know the problem with houses. We've just lost a flat up the road. So he said, well, buy this house. I said, I'd love to buy this house, but it's way out of our price range. It was £28,000. So he said to me, well, have it for £27,000. I said, I'd love to be able to buy it for £27,000, but again, it really is out of our price range. So he said, well, what can you afford? I said, well, all the mortgage people will grant us is a mortgage of £20,000. So he said, well, I can't quite go that low, but what I could do is to sell it to you for £24,000. You get your mortgage of £20,000. And he said, and I give to you a £4,000 interest-free loan, which you could pay back over the next 4 or 5 years. Well, I nearly ripped his arm off. I jumped at the offer and told Ruth about it. We were both very excited. We went and had a look around this house, and we were thrilled at this 3-bedroom house, which we ended up buying and living in. And it actually was the home for our 3 sons, where they were all born into that home. And God knew that we needed 3 bedrooms rather than 2 bedrooms. And it became a very, very happy home. And we found that that type of thing has happened again and again. And we've now had 41 years of proving God is faithful again and again and again. Now, I know if we were to share stories, that many of you could far outdo the story that I have just given. Many of you would put your hand up and say, yes, God has been good to us again and again and again. So hear this verse. It says, "Honour the Lord with the first fruits of your wealth." And as we do that, then his promise is our barns will be full and our vats will overflow with wine. I found that God is no man's debtor. He's a much bigger and more generous giver than I am. And when we give our little bit, God seems to give back to us way out of proportion anything we've given. He seems to have a much bigger shovel, and is our testimony to the faithfulness of God. Yes, when we gave our first tithe, it was a little bit painful. Is this really going to work? Will it work? And God puts us through a test ground, but we found without question that God has been good and faithful to his word and his promises again and again and again. He will be for you. Thanks so much for listening, and God bless you richly as you give. Steve Brading.